Welcome to Small Business, Big Network, the podcast for small business owners who want big results from their networking. I'm Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist who knows that if you're not working, then networking could help. Babs Vinden-Cantrell has a very varied career history and has most recently become a children's author. She's made a lot of useful connections over the years that have helped her with her career, and she puts this down to networking. Thank you very much for being my podcast guest today, Babs.
That's okay, welcome.
Now, I know that you wear several business hats as a business coach, an author, a recruiter for the British Army, but what's your career path been? What was the first thing that you did?
Initially, I was actually a dancer.
Wow.
I used to be sort of like your backing dancer in pantomimes and summer seasons and things like that, and I did that. I actually did it from being about 8 years old. I was one of them cute dancers that you see at pantomimes and things, and it was great because I used to have to get licensed, so you used to have to have about 2 months off school every year. So that was really cool. So and we were supposed to get tutored, but we never did. But yeah, so I did that, and then I carried on to be an adult dancer, and it was a bit more sort of in them days. You're talking 40 years ago. It sort of wasn't seen as a career, and everybody was, no, you need to go and get yourself a normal job now. And I kind of succumbed to that. So ended up initially working for corporates. So for the electricity board, I got sort of like a clerical traineeship and went and worked there and sort of worked there for sort of about 5 or 6 years before sort of marrying a soldier actually, and ending up going down south, still corporate and still not working for the electricity board, but going across to other companies for a few years before eventually just it got, that need to actually be a bit more than that and do a bit more adventure and be more the person I wanted to be eventually. I sort of realised that life was mine. It took me a while really to realise that there were things out there that I needed to do. I wasn't just going to go down that route of staying in that 9 to 5. So I was quite a few years before I don't know whether it was got the confidence or actually got the knowledge that things were out there that you could do. And then getting the confidence then to actually go and do it. I think there's a bit of both really. I think years ago, you didn't really get the knowledge as to what was out there that you could actually achieve. And I think especially as girls sort of 40 years ago, it was very much still, there were people that I worked with the electricity board that left work when they got married, let alone when they had a baby. It was still that sort of era. So to actually realise that them opportunities were there, it's quite sparse because nobody told you, nobody talked about it, and the people around you were doing the old-fashioned stuff still.
Yeah. So what was your next move then after you left corporate?
I went into the military then, and that was a big move actually, because it was actually when I actually got divorced that I realised that I was still not doing what I wanted, and at that point I'd got 3 children, all under 5, but decided no, this is it. I'm one of these people that just jumps in and goes, right, now I'll deal with it, I'll cope with it. So it was a case of me just going for it, and it worked fine. It was absolutely brilliant, and the kids loved being squaddy brats as they're and it's done them all the world of good. But it takes a lot of hard work because there's a lot of things there that you could quite easily, and you can understand, people can say that's a bit hard, how are you going to do duties, and how are you going to go and do courses or go on a tour and things like that. So you do have to sort of get your administration together to be able to do it. But if you're determined enough, which I was, then it works. But yeah, and it's a scary thing, and I can understand why a lot of people don't want to do it, because it's kind of one of them things where everybody meaning well and telling you it's going to be hard actually puts you off. Whereas you've got to kind of go, no, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does, at least I've done it. So that was I think that's always been my attitude actually. I sort of just go, no, I'm going to do this. If I want to do something hard enough, then I'll find a way of doing it.
Yeah. And I know you've been with the army for getting on for 40 years now, and you work in recruitment these days. What kind, how has that been over the last couple of years? Because presumably normally you would be going to fairs and to schools and to so on, but what happened over the pandemic? How did you carry on with the recruiting?
Yeah, well, you're right. I normally would do probably about 160 events a year,
Mm,
all across the UK. And when the pandemic happened, it was a case of changing the way you worked on things. So there's a lot of Zoom calls,
mm.
and I'm not the most techie person, definitely. So that was quite difficult. And I think at the beginning, because everybody was suddenly finding this new way of working. Sometimes, especially at the beginning, some of the calls were absolutely awful
Mm.
on everybody's side because people just didn't know what to do, and you were more busy looking at somebody's background and whether the curtains were nice and what pictures they had or anything else. Um, but then over time, probably it took about probably 7 or 8 months, and then some organisations came up with some really good packages that you know were very good. You had little rooms to go in and you could have discussions with people, because that's one of the things that face to face and going to an event gives you, is that you have that discussion, you get a rapport with the person,
Yeah.
and you can actually talk to them. A lot of people are quite worried, unless somebody really wants to be in the forces and comes, you know, striding over to you because they know about it, they know they want to do it. A lot of people don't understand what the forces entails and what
Mm.
sort of jobs there are there. And quite often when you were on Zoom calls, people automatically didn't talk to you because they hadn't considered that they
Yeah.
could possibly be having anything to do with you. And you lost a lot of that over that time because you weren't having that face to face. Whereas when you're actually there and you start talking to them about engineering and about
Mhm.
administration and medical and geologists and even, you know, seamstress and things like
Mhm.
that, people suddenly go, wow, you can do that. And but you know, you've had that opportunity because you stood in front of them, so it was quite difficult, and until getting to a bit further towards the end. But also there was a lot of the sort of Twitter and Facebook side of it, anything that was going on, making sure that we were letting people know
Mm.
what was happening and where we were. And as things started opening up, telling them different things that the unit was involved in, because the unit, the nature of the unit, they do a lot of work all over the world,
Mm.
on projects which are ongoing, because we get involved in a lot of humanitarian aid, disaster relief, things like that. So those things still happen. The unit itself was the unit that actually built a lot of the Nightingale hospitals.
Mm.
So it was very, very busy over that period. So what we then started doing was saying to people, yeah, we are still working because this is what we're doing. We're doing things that you actually know about. We're building these hospitals.
Yeah.
And I was actually 3 days a week, I was vaccinating people.
Mm.
So, you know, the military was still very involved in everything. But a lot of people didn't understand that. So, you know, we tried to really get on board that social side of it and doing some articles in magazines and things like that.
Yeah. I read in your LinkedIn profile that you sort of introduced social media to your unit. So which platforms are you now active on?
Well, we've got the Twitter and Facebook mainly, to be honest, and then we've got the LinkedIn. We've got, because the unit have different specialities. We've got teams doing power, rail, ports, airfields, water, fuel. They're very different industries. So each one of the works groups, and we've also got the geologists. So each of the works groups have actually got their own um, Twitter now, where they'll actually put out to the different industries that they're involved
Mm.
in. And we also, because we're involved in a lot of the associations, and things like, there's one of the associations that one of our unit members actually created, um, which is called Chain.
Mhm.
And it brings every single part of engineering together. And he's very much a forefront. He's an absolutely brilliant guy, but he's at the forefront of bringing new technologies into
Mhm.
engineering. So things like that, we've kind of really hopped on anything that was sort of out there, that, and engineers are really excited in engineering. very passionate about engineering and the way forward. So anything like that our unit can say to people, this is what we're doing, this is what we're involved in, this is how we're getting people together.
Yeah.
We would do that social aspect.
Yeah. Now, communication is something clearly you're very passionate about, and I know you spent some time at Red Magazine. How did that come about?
Well, because I was so busy, I'm not the biggest reader in the world. I used to be years ago, but I'm not now because I'm so busy. So I sort of probably about 15 years ago, I said, right, I'm going to start reading something. So I decided I'd find a magazine that I enjoyed, because I realised I could read an article
Mm,
and then I'd have it finished, but I just never got time to read a book.
yeah.
So so I actually started reading Red. And I enjoyed it. It was very much kind of on par with myself
Mm,
and how I feel about things, and the sort of articles were really good and interesting. Um, and then it's probably about 9 years ago when they advertised about interns. So it was going to be sort of like, it was called a grown-up internship, basically,
mm.
for a month. And this one was for a features sort of writer. And I just thought, I'm going to put in for it. So I wrote, you had to sort of write, I can't remember now, it's probably about 300 or 400 words, and you had to
Mhm.
write a little article and send it off. Um, and then maybe about 2 months later, fortunately in my junk, and I was like checking the junk, always check your junk. It's amazing what you might miss.
Yeah.
Um, so I sort of looked at the junk, and it was a mail from Red to say that I'd been successful, which was like quite amazing. I was kind of, at that point I was thinking, why did there was only me applied? Sort of, you couldn't quite believe it, but yeah, so I was successful with that, and it was a month working at Red in their offices, which are just off Carnaby Street,
Wow.
and it was incredible because it's the knowledge. I mean, I've always been really good at writing. I've always enjoyed writing. But working at the magazine and seeing how they get their stories, how they bring the articles together, and the difference between what they're creating for the magazine and what they're creating for the online side, and
Mm,
how that differs, how they interact with the celebrities that they're dealing with, or the stories. Um, Things like when you went in the office, even for the online side, they had a couple of computers up on the sort of side to say what what was going on with regards to their website, and
mhm.
where people were coming in from, where people were, looking at the website from, and how they'd got there, whether it had been through another article or whether it was a direct entry. So those sort of things were interesting to see exactly where were you actually affecting in the world. What was really interesting was, I think there was one article that we did on Mary Berry and her cupcakes,
Mm.
and the world went mad. And apparently, Mary Berry is the biggest draw of the magazine, apart from maybe David Beckham. But it's like literally, they put Mary Berry and her cupcakes on, and the whole site goes mad. So yeah, and again, that was an interesting thing with regards to just the effect a celebrity
Yeah.
has on any sort of media,
Yeah.
and understanding a bit more why they would want David Beckham on the front, because he sells 4 times the amount of papers than
Mhm.
anybody else does. And that understanding of how the whole industry sort of works,
Yeah.
really, because I think before then you were very much like, oh, why do they always have him, or why would they pay somebody so much money to be on the front of a magazine? And then you realize it's because that magazine's going to sell
Yeah.
5 times the amount of copies that it normally does. Why would you put Mary Berry's cupcakes on as
Yeah.
opposed to somebody else's? Well,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, we all love Mary Berry, and therefore everybody's then more interested. So there was a lot from that, and a lot from also events, because at that point I hadn't gone into the job I've got now.
Mhm.
And Red do put quite a few events together that people can apply to go on. And there were a few events that we did, and one was actually an author's one, actually at the British Museum. And it was being involved in that, setting it up, talking to the authors, making sure they're comfortable, making sure the audience is coming in and getting their little takeaway bags, just, you know, making sure that all the refreshments are out, that people coming in were getting the good time that they wanted,
Mhm.
that entertainment value, because they paid for it. I think they paid like £50 or something like that for the night, and they got the book and they got to meet the authors, they got food, they got champagne when they got in, they got this wonderful atmosphere. And it was that realization that actually, no, you can't just do this in the Scout Hall up the road.
Yeah.
This is, people are paying for entertainment, and I think that's come out. I know we're going to talk about it later, but I can't remember who it was who said, but even when you're writing a book or an article, people are reading it to be entertained,
Mm.
and have you entertained them? You know, so
Yeah.
that whole philosophy of, you know, this is what people are, and the same as your podcast, people are coming on the podcast because they want to be entertained, or they want to be informed about
Mhm.
something. That's what they want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you done that?
Yeah.
And I thought that was, I did used to kind of touch on that when I was teaching, because I was an instructor for about 12 years within the military. And it was very much one of them things where, even though the guys were being instructed on something they had to know about, so sometimes, you know, if somebody's been told you've got to go in that lesson,
Mhm.
it's kind of like, oh God, really?
Yeah.
You know, they're not there by choice. They're
Yes.
there because somebody's told them to go in and they've got to learn this subject. So you've got to think, right, okay, how am I going to make this so that the guys sit up and go, oh, actually, this is quite interesting, and have them go away from that lesson thinking, wow, I've actually learned something today. I've heard people come out of people's lessons, fortunately not mine, where they've come out and gone, oh my God, I'm not going to get that hour back. And
Yeah.
you think, right, I don't want somebody to have that. I want them to come
Mhm.
out and go, well, do you know what? If nothing else, I now know
Yes.
that that does that.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we do that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's that sort of thing.
So at what point in your very varied career did you decide to train in coaching and counselling, which I know is something that you do now?
I think that was more because obviously we were heavily involved in Afghan and Iraq at the time.
Mhm.
And I've always had, I think, all binds in together, all this interest in how people tick, and what gets people progressing. I think it was more about me wanting people to realize they could do things. And I think that goes right back to the beginning of me saying that as a kid you were told, yeah, you're just a girl, mate,
Mm-mm.
just go and sit there and then you'll get married and have kids and sew at home, sort of thing, and things like that. And so I think I really wanted to make sure that people knew that they could go somewhere, and
Mm.
that they could do things with their life, and sort of trying to get them to sort of realize that,
Yeah.
and be sort of thinking that, oh, there's nothing out there for anybody, or I'm just from there, so there's nothing for me.
Yeah.
So I was always interested in it from that point of view, and I started um, really getting involved with a lot of the guys when they were coming back, and maybe for some reason they weren't staying in the military.
Mhm.
Um, and quite a few of them, it was very much like, oh, I'll just go and do a security job. Not that there's
Mm.
anything wrong with that, but they didn't know they'd got other attributes that
Yeah.
could get them to other places. And you sort of sit with them and talk about what they'd done, and how they could actually go and progress into something else that they wanted to do. I
Yeah.
think it's very similar to me in the fact of just saying, no, you can do this. You can go and do anything you want, really,
Yeah.
as long as you arrange everything, that you put the effort in. If you put the effort into it, if you just go and jump and you've not put the effort in, the chances are you might sort of sink a little bit because
Mhm.
you've not put everything in place. But sort of saying to people, if you're prepared to actually put everything in place, and to sort of look into it and go, right, okay, yeah, I'm now ready to jump, and now ready to do this, that, and the other, then they can progress. And that was really the reason I went into it. And off the back of that, you would, because that one of the reasons for obviously being qualified in all the coaching and that is that quite often off the back of that, you'll then come up with hidden reasons why they're scared of doing things.
Mm.
So you need to be prepared and know how to deal with somebody's hidden reason that suddenly
Yeah.
comes up as to why they don't want to do something.
Yeah.
So, when you do start helping people, you're also there's other things might suddenly raise the head. So it was
Yeah.
that side of it as well.
So who are your coaching clients? What kind of backgrounds do they come from? Are they from mostly from the military? Are they mostly women, or is it all sorts of people that you work with?
Well, to be honest, because I don't do that as a business, I just do it really. It's through the military that I've done that,
Right.
and just a few um, people that I know that have just come to me and had a chat. What I did do, I had a few people that came to me. I do a presentation called Me PLC,
Mm.
which is all about basically what I've just said. It's about realizing that you are your own PLC.
Mm.
Doesn't matter who you work for. You could work for the bank or you could work for yourself, but you are still your own company. So if you work for the bank, you're just supplying the bank with a service so that they pay you into your company. You're your own boss. So when you start saying to people about the fact that because this is their company, you've got your choice about going on courses, you've got your choice about who you work for, you got your choice about whether you move or whether you want something to be part-time or whether you want something to be working weekends or working nights or whatever it is. It still comes down to your choice. And I know we're talking about people who've got financial situations, but if you take control of your PLC, how you come across, how you network, how you have people perceive you and where you want to go, then all of a sudden you can start having control about, your worth.
Mm.
So
Mm.
it was kind of what once I started doing presentations to universities and to civil service actually, and to some military charities. And from that, there were a few people that phoned me and asked me if I'd do one-to-one coaching with them. Um, but it was all very much, I didn't get paid for it or anything like that. I
Hmm.
just do it because that just came off the back of me doing the presentations.
Yeah. So let's have a little chat about networking now, because you just mentioned that then. I think networking is something that you use yourself, but you also help other people to do effectively too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and networking is my favourite subject, and the kids sort of say to you that I'm just literally I could talk to anybody. Well, and I generally do, unfortunately. But it's networking brings so much to you, and it opens up also. I mean, yesterday I took my dad down to see my daughter's new house down south. And my dad goes to church every week, so he really looked forward to going to the church that's local to her. And we went in there and it was a lovely service. And afterwards, have a coffee. And I was talking to a lady and just opening that conversation. And by the time I'd finished, I've been invited to go to like a women's institute to go and do a talk on my book.
Yeah.
Um, so it's sort of, and then I spoke to somebody. In fact, my daughter spoke to somebody else there, and then they introduced her because she plays for. She's just been taken on to play for Wycombe Wanderers as
Mm.
football. Um, and one of the guys there is on the senior team for the men's Wycombe Wanderers. So it's that it's all that. You go, and if you're prepared to just say hello and then open up that conversation, all of a sudden you've got these connections. Yeah, I mean, that's what the World Wide Web is for anybody
Mm.
who's more modern than me. That's what that is. But in days gone by, and still now, this is your own little web that you open up a conversation about, whether it's the favourite of the weather or whether it's sport or what they've watched on telly or the local area, and all of a sudden it starts opening up all sorts of avenues for
Mm.
you. I mean, the same two of my children work in television. And the whole thing from that was that I do another little thing that I do. I work on the security for stages at big festivals, so like
Yeah.
Glastonbury and at Reading. I'm actually at Reading this weekend. And when you do all these festivals, it's all the same people, same camera people, same bands that are on the circuit, the
Hmm.
same stage hands and things like that. And you kind of you don't get to know them, but you see them all the time and you
Yeah.
nod. And then eventually you go, hello. And then you get to know the name and things like that. And then eventually, sort of like when my girls started helping me out on this, they just asked the camera guys, "Oh, how'd you get in?" And they went, "Oh,
Mm.
okay, well, this," they got them to do one of the earlier bands. They showed them how to do it. And then the next minute, like, my daughter then got invited to go and do Strictly,
Yeah.
and do as one of the juniors on Strictly, and that's 5 years ago. And now they're both full time. But that's just that hello, nodding, just, "Oh,
Yeah.
how do you do that then?"
Yeah.
So the opportunities are absolutely massive. And as I say, I'm quite confident anyway. But if I'll go up and say hello to anybody, and constantly find something that
Yeah.
is uncommon for you to suddenly. I mean, I'm quite lucky. I've lived in a lot of places. I travel around the UK. I'm really interested in loads and loads of things. So
Yeah.
if somebody says something, I can generally pick up and have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And it just leads you to all sorts of things, and it has done with me. It'll get me introduced or invited into events. And I do it through work. I mean, through work, a lot of the events that we get, I have to find myself,
Hmm.
by just sort of, either I'll look on um, Google to see what events are coming up, or with regards to the universities, I'll get to know the guys that are in the recruitment side of it and the careers side of it, and then you'll go and chat with them, and then you'll do presentations, and by the time you finish, you've got this massive network of people
Yeah.
that are not just helping each other with that job, but they're helping each other with other things as well.
Yeah.
Um,
I think what you've just said goes to prove that it's worth making that first move, isn't it? And starting a conversation with somebody, even if it makes you feel a bit uncomfortable. You're in a room where you know nobody, but just strike up a conversation. You just never know where it's going to lead.
oh no, and us British have got the great thing about the weather. I mean,
Yeah.
we can always start a conversation with the weather in the UK. Always, no matter what's going on, the weather's always there for us. Um, but yeah, there's so many different things that you can just, even if um, you're just waiting for a bus, and then two come along at once, and you just go, "Oh, two come along at once," and then suddenly you've opened that conversation
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
It's just anything and everything. But I know you've got to have a little bit of confidence, and it's quite scary. And I tend to, especially when I'm talking to the universities now, you tend to find quite a few of the younger kids. They're a little bit scared to do that
Mm.
face to face, really, because
Yeah.
they're so used to being on their different
Yeah.
computers or phones and things like that. They'd rather text you from across
Yes.
the street. Um, so I think they're finding it even scarier, and especially after COVID, where they've been stuck inside,
Yeah.
it's even more so. So it's so important for them to just be able to have that, say hello, have that chat, and
Yeah.
and open up those conversations. Because like I said before, with regards to the events, so much more difficult to just explain to somebody what things are, or have
Yeah.
that opening when you're over Zoom and things like that. Whereas you just being, so you stood there having a coffee, you can talk till the, well, I can talk till the cows come home, that's for sure. So
Now, we've touched on this briefly, but I'd like to, before you go, have a little chat about your book. Tell us about the book that you've written.
yeah, I've written a children's picture book. Um, I've always loved writing, and from being a kid, I used to sort of write my own little sort of poems and birthday cards and things like that. Um, and I always entered competitions, not to win them, but just because it was an excuse to write something.
Hmm.
Um, and I wanted to write a book, even though I'm not a big reader. I wanted to write a book, but I really couldn't think of what I wanted to write about. And when I was in Blackpool one day with the family, we go to Blackpool a lot, and I was in Blackpool with the family, and my brother came back from the prom, and they were laughing, him and his girls, and he was like, "Oh," he said, "we just got attacked by seagulls." And I said, "Oh," so what are they doing? He said, "Well, one took my donut." So the other one took Molly's ice cream. Said, "But they didn't take Lucy's sorbet." And I just went, "Oh, maybe they don't eat sorbet." And I just went, "Oh, that is my book." I was like, "Oh my God, that's my book." And literally, I became besotted with seagulls from that point on. And I wrote, and again, this is where networking comes in. It all kind of comes in together. I wrote a story, and the story ended up being about 55,000 words. It was rather long, and I knew it was rather long. And because I went away a lot on all my events, because this started pre-COVID, this was 4 years ago. I used to just sit at night, because I'd be in hotels all over the place. So I'd sit at night and just keep going with this story. And I'd be sat by a beach, or I'd be sat by the London Eye, or I'd be sat wherever it was, just writing. And it, as I say, ended up being about 55,000 words. And I showed it to my dad. My dad's a big reader. And I showed it to my dad, and he had a look at it. And there's nothing like a 92-year-old turning around and just saying, "I'm seagulled out." He couldn't read anymore after about 20 pages. I was like, "Oh, okay." So I knew that I had to do something with it, because it was too long, and I didn't even know who it was for, really. I'd just, like I did with all my competitions, I'd just written for writing's sake. And I sent the book to a friend of mine who is in television. He's an ex-EastEnders actor, actually, but he now does writing. And he had a look. And then one day I was at work, and I just got a text message that basically said, "I suggest you put Radio 4 on right now." There was no hello, no nothing else. I thought, "Oh, okay then." So I found Radio 4, because I'd never been on it before. And it was a story that was being told. And I listened to it, and I sort of realised it was kind of a similar genre to me. And I thought, well, he obviously thinks, for him to have texted me and told me to do that, he obviously thinks that this is similar. So I then cheekily sent a mail I found out who the guy was who'd written it, and then found on Google, I found his sort of contacts through his agent, and I sent a cheeky mail and sent him a copy of the book. And he was nice enough, after a couple of weeks of obviously reading my 55,000 word book, he was nice enough to come back, and he said, "You've got loads of stories here, you need to split it." Which was amazing, because and then he said, "Right, I suggest you go and get The Snail and the Whale by Julia Donaldson." So I sort of hot-footed it to W.H. Smith's, and given that my youngest is 25, I've not had any of them at all in the house for a long time. So I went and got hers, and I got a couple of hers and a couple of David Walliams, and looked at them, and I thought, wow, yeah, mine does split the same way these do. So I then spent the next sort of year splitting the books up. My mum was poorly at the time. Unfortunately, she passed away last year. And while I was with her and just sat with her, I just split the books up. And then once I'd split them up, of what started off as this really long story suddenly became a picture book. So now I had to find an illustrator to add to this new story that I suddenly got. And I had a friend who was an illustrator, who I've known for about 20 years, and I really wanted him to do it. And I passed him the stories, and he worked on it for a couple of months, and he came back and he was like, "I really can't do this." He said, "I can't get these seagulls right." And at that point, I wasn't writing a book that was actually going to be in the shops. I was just writing a book because, as always, I just wanted to just write. I wasn't thinking it was ever going to go anywhere. And I was sort of, "Oh, it doesn't matter." And he was like, "No, this needs to be right, and I can't do it." So he introduced me to a girl who was actually a tattoo artist called Esther. And I sent her the first story that I'd done. And she just came back with these characters that were so amazing. I mean, better than I could have ever have thought of, to be honest. They were absolutely incredible. And that was it. So from then on, she was doing all the illustrations. But the last year has been, and it's been a learning curve for both of us, because she's never done a book before. So this last year has literally been putting these illustrations to the writing, or realizing sort of the pages that had maybe too much description on a page for her to be able to put the illustrations, so having to split maybe your story a little bit on the pages, and then little mistakes that you make as somebody who's doing things at the beginning. Things like once she'd done some pictures and she did them all colour and they were all great, and then all of a sudden it was like, "Oh, we're gonna have to split that page now." And then so the second book, I mean, the first book is just it's published this week. The second book, which the illustrations have just been finished on, the learning was, right, I'm going to do these in black and white first. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
going to do
yeah,
them in colour, because she spent so much time getting everything right, and then all of a sudden we were changing it because of
yeah.
different things. So lots of learning. Things like children's books are generally square. You don't
Mm.
really notice that, but they are.
Mhm.
But when we did everything initially, we did everything on that sort of A4 that comes up on.
Yeah, yeah.
So then she had to start changing things to fit a square picture rather than an A4 picture. So the last year was very much both of us on this journey together, just learning as we sort of went along, really,
Mhm.
and getting this book together. But I say the first one is actually it's actually in sort of WH Smith's and Waterstones and Amazon and all the sort of main bookstores now. Its actual publishing date is 28th of August, but I know sort of it's actually started being sent out
Yeah.
now, which is so exciting, because that wasn't actually what my end goal was.
Yeah.
It's that it's just gone that way. And again, now it's all about the networking side again. And it comes back to that. So Red Magazine are featuring me in the October issue
Brilliant.
as, what happened next to the intern.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, it's everything's, same as with yourself. It's that going to networking events and meeting somebody.
yeah.
Yesterday at church, suddenly this lady um, has asked me to go and do this presentation. And it's in an area where actually it's quite a good area. It's like Henley-on-Thames and things like that.
Mhm.
So it's quite an area where there's a lot of literacy things go on.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's sort of, it might not be something that helps you now, but me thinking now, wow, that 8 years ago it read, and all of a sudden
yeah,
I'm kind of going to be advertised in the Red magazine next month through
yeah.
that. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. And although when I'm talking to people, I'll sort of say to them, "Oh, see what your end result you want to do, and then you can go for it." Well, actually, I didn't have an end result on this, and actually, it's just been that it's just by people, same with Esther, knowing somebody who knew her, and
Yeah.
she just getting this, she's never even been to Blackpool, but she feels as though she has. That she's like, she was so good at her job, and one of the things that she's done is and the proof is in the pudding, in the fact that I would tell her something and she would really look, and we're all quite fortunate with Google these days, but she would Google, how does that look in Blackpool? How does it come across? How should I bring
Yeah,
that across? If you're going to do a job well, then do it properly. And then,
yeah,
the benefits from it are absolutely great.
yeah. Well, huge, huge congratulations on the publication of your first book, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come. Just finally, then, if people want to find out more about you or about the book, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Babs?
Well, the actual book's called Seagulls Don't Eat Sorbet. And the one thing that I have done, actually, that I've got to work out with the future, is that I've called it Seagulls Don't Eat Sorbet, but that's the whole series. This one's the first adventure,
Mm.
and the second one's Got to Dance. I'm not too sure how that works in bookstores, because they've both got the same title, really, apart from this little addition. So I've got to sort of look and see how that goes. But yeah, so if they put that into Google, then you can see a lot of information about that. From myself, I'm on LinkedIn at the moment. I've not actually gone down the social media route yet with the book. I've still got to work that out. But I'm on LinkedIn, Babs Vinden-Cantrell. But I think when you actually do put the Seagulls Don't Eat Sorbet in, it comes up with my LinkedIn anyway.
Right.
And they'd be able to sort of contact me through that.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for being my guest, and best of luck with the book sales starting soon.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Small Business, Big Network. If you found this podcast useful, please do rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with the rest of your network too.